In 2010, a classified US military video appeared online. It showed an American Apache helicopter hovering over Baghdad. Below it, a group of civilians walked through the streets. The pilots were joking, then they opened fire. People collapsed, and among the dead were two Reuters journalists. Within 24 hours, 5 million people had watched it, and suddenly, all eyes were on Washington. The panic wasn't about what the video showed, it was about who had leaked it. The video came from the Pentagon's own systems. No hacking from outside, no foreign spies. Someone inside had access, and the US government realized something terrifying. This wasn't a single file. Whoever did this had hundreds of thousands of classified documents, war logs and diplomatic tables, secrets spanning years, and they were ready to publish everything. The man behind the leak was an Australian called Julian Assange. He grew up moving constantly, and computers became the only stability in his life. By his late teens, Assange was already an exceptional hacker. By his early 20s, he was operating under his hacker's name Mandax inside military networks and government infrastructure. Australian authorities discovered that he had access systems like NASA and the Pentagon, and that's when the Australian government began to quietly monitor him. And eventually, he was caught. And that's where the story took an unexpected turn. Investigators searched for damage. They searched for theft, they searched for profit, but they found none. Assange hadn't erased any data. He hadn't altered systems or sold secrets. He had accessed information and left it exactly where it is. In court, prosecutors struggled to define the crime. There was no evidence of malicious intent. Technically, he hadn't broken any laws, so Assange walked freely, but he walked with a very important conclusion. If simply accessing information could shake the government, then publishing verified information could trigger something much bigger. And that's when Julian stopped thinking like a hacker and started thinking like a problem governments couldn't arrest away. Hacking exposed weaknesses in the system, and publishing exposed weaknesses in power. And power reacts very differently when it's exposed. At the beginning, nobody was paying attention. Julian launched WikiLeaks in 2006 with one simple promise. Documents could be submitted anonymously and published without negotiation. The first leaks didn't target superpowers. They targeted uncomfortable truth. One of the earliest documents revealed the secret order, authorizing the assassination of journalists and opposition leaders in Somalia. Although it didn't go viral, but intelligence agency noticed it. Then came a leak from Kenya. A classified report exposed corruption at the highest level of the government: judges, police, and senior officials. The document gave away names, and within days, WikiLeaks received legal threats. And within weeks, the report was confirmed authentic. And that was the moment governments understood something dangerous. This platform didn't need insiders with power. It only needed documents. By 2008, WikiLeaks published documents related to major Swiss bank, revealing large-scale tax evasion. The bank tried to shut down the website through US courts. The court agreed and WikiLeaks was offline. The surprise was, it returned hours later. The case was officially dropped. Not because the bank was innocent, but because continuing would prove the allegations to be real. Every time WikiLeaks published something true, the response wasn't denial. It was containment. The site wasn't accused of lying. It was accused of existing. And that's when the US started paying attention. Inside the US government, opinions about Assange split sharply. Some officials admitted that the documents were real, the killings did happen, and that the reports were accurate. Others saw something entirely different. They didn't see Julian as a publisher, but as a threat to control. On television, politicians were labeling him as an enemy and terrorist. One official even said, "We need to make an example of him, because if Assange survived this, others would simply follow." By the end of 2010, WikiLeaks had crossed a line. Hundreds of thousands of US military and diplomatic documents were now available for the public. Governments were embarrassed, allies were exposed, and Washington needed a way to stop the man at the center of it, without making him look like a martyr. That's when Sweden entered the story. In August 2010, Julian Assange traveled to Stockholm for a series of talks. During the visit, two men reported him for sexual harassment. Prosecutors denied to file charges, and allegations were dropped within days. Assange was eventually allowed to leave the country. Then something unusual happened. The case was reopened. Sweden issued a request for Assange to return to Sweden for questioning. Assange's lawyer offered alternatives: questioning by video links, questioning in London, even in questioning at the Swedish embassy. All of the offers were refused. Instead, a European arrest warrant was issued, and suddenly the narrative changed. Assange was no longer discussed as a publisher. He was being framed as a fugitive. At the same time, when Sweden was pursuing questioning, the United States was building a case under the Espionage Act, a law designed for spies, not publishers. Sweden had one of the most cooperative extradition relationships with the US in Europe, and Assange knew if he stepped on Swedish soil, the next request may not come from Stockholm, it would come from Washington. US officials were already calling him a terrorist. Some openly discussed assassination. So Assange made a decision that defined the next decade of his life. He fought the extradition. By late 2011, Julian Assange was running out of options. If he returned to Sweden, he risked extradition to the US. If he stayed in the UK, he faced arrest for violating bail. If he fled illegally, he confirmed the narrative that had been built around him. There was no safe exit, only delays. And that's when Ecuador entered the picture. At the time, Ecuador was governed by President Correa, a leader openly critical of US influence in South America. Korea's government has positioned itself as a defender of sovereignty, press freedom, and political asylum. Granting protection to Assange was not only a legal decision, it was a political statement. Through communication with Assange's legal team, Ecuador made something clear. If he could reach their embassy in London, they would consider a request for asylum. On June 19, 2012, Assange made his move. He walked out of a building in central London, entered a car, and disappeared into the traffic. Within minutes, he crossed the threshold of the Ecuadorian embassy. Under international law, that changed everything. The embassy was sovereign Ecuadorian territory. British police could not legally enter. Assange was now beyond immediate reach. 2 months later, Ecuador formally granted him political asylum. Ecuador stated that Assange faced credible risk, unfair prosecution, and potential mistreatment if extradited to the US. British authorities responded immediately. Police established permanent presence in front of the embassy. Officers monitored entrances, cameras were installed, arrest team remained on standby. The message was clear: you're free to stay, but you're not free to leave. At first, life inside the embassy was manageable. Staff were friendly and supportive. He had access to visitors, media, and legal team. But reality set in quickly. The embassy was small. There was no outdoor access, no direct sunlight, no fresh air. Medical visits were restricted, and movement was limited to a handful of rooms. Assange could not step outside without being arrested. His health started to decline and anxiety deepened. And then suddenly, something else began to change. The tone inside the embassy shifted. What had begun as refuge started to feel like a containment. For years, the standoff outside the embassy barely changed. British police waited, Assange stayed inside. Ecuador held the line. But political protection is only stable as long as politics remain stable. In 2017, Ecuador elected a new president, Lenín Moreno. Moreno was not Rafael Correa. When Correa had framed the asylum as resistance to the US, Moreno framed his presidency around normalization, repairing relationships, attracting foreign investments, and rebuilding trust with Western institutions. Ecuador's priority had changed, and Assange became a problem. And behind the scenes, Ecuador was facing economic strain. The country needed access to international credit, loans from global financial institutions where US influence mattered, and sometimes even decisive. At the same time, diplomatic pressure intensified, and Assange's presence became a bargaining chip. Inside the embassy, the shift was immediate. The atmosphere hardened. His internet access was cut, visitors were restricted or even denied. Even his conversation with his legal team were no longer private. Unknown to him, cameras and microphones inside the embassy recorded his daily life. Not just usual conversations, meeting with doctors and journalists, even confidential discussions with his lawyers. The protection that the asylum was supposed to provide quietly started to disappear. The embassy was no longer sheltering him, it was managing him. Rules multiplied, silence was demanded, public statements were forbidden. In 2018, Ecuador formally acknowledged that the asylum was temporary and politically inconvenient. By April 2019, the decision had been made. Ecuador announced that Julian Assange had violated the terms of his asylum, and that he had interfered in international affairs, and that he had failed to respect the embassy rules. Within hours of the announcement, Ecuador invited British police inside the embassy. For the first time in nearly 7 years, the door opened. Assange was dragged out, physically weakened, visibly disoriented, shouting as officers carried him into a waiting van. The standoff was over, not because the legal questions were resolved, but because the protection had been withdrawn. The asylum ended with a signature, not with a court ruling. He was sentenced in the UK, then held while the US pursued extradition. For years, he remained in a high-security prison. Doctors warned that his health was deteriorating. Human rights organizations called it psychological torture. And after prolonged legal battles and international pressure, Julian Assange was finally released. In 2024, he returned home to Australia, not as a free man in the traditional sense, but alive and permanently marked. WikiLeaks stopped publishing the way it once did, and the message had been delivered. Julian Assange didn't leak rumors. He leaked documents governments admitted they were real, and for that, he lost his freedom, his health, and nearly his life. He spent nearly a decade confined without sunlight. So here's the real question. If exposing war crimes is a crime, what does that make the crimes themselves? This is the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have more ideas for me to cover in the next episodes, leave it in the comments. Until next time.